morning, everybody. All right. Hello? Okay, there we go. So today we are following along with the series of At the Movies, and for today's installment in that series, I picked probably, if you know me, one of my favorite movies of all time. And as I show some clips from it, you'll probably understand why. Now, the first clip we're going to show is just the trailer for the movie, and it's just so we're clear, it's a little bit intense, but it's the point of the movie. It's very much a Hitchcockian thriller about some scientists who are working together. So we'll show the preview, and then I'll explain more.
You're talking about making a bigger one. You're talking about making a bigger one.
That hopefully wasn't too scary. That was about as intense as the clips we get. And what we're going to be talking about today is 1 John 2:15. And what we're going to be talking about, I'm going to give you a little bit of an intro to it, is we're going to be talking about the path and the decision to decide between living the righteous life and living the sinful life for this world. So now this movie, I said, is one of my favorite movies. It's one of my favorite movies for a number of reasons. I'm going to talk a little bit about the movie, and then we're going to bring it into 1 John. So why this is one of my favorite movies is this was made by an engineer. It was made by an engineer with a budget of $7,000, and he...
For hitting that point, because I'm sitting here like, this is not our big budget film.
No, it is absolutely not a big budget film at all. And he was an engineer who decided one day, he's like, I'm going to learn how to make a movie. I'm a pretty smart guy. I think I can figure that out. So he goes to the library, checks out a book about cinematography, checks out a couple more, and before you know it, he wins the Sundance Grand Jury Prize with his very first movie. And he is the main actor as well as directed and wrote everything. And that $7,000 entirely paid for the film, of which he shot 80 minutes of film, 72 of which are in the final film. Wow. So he didn't waste a single minute pretty much, and almost entirely all of the money was just to get the camera in the film. So it's a very, very impressive movie technically from that standpoint. And here's a movie from somebody who otherwise didn't have any experience and wrote a Grand Jury award-winning film on his first try, and he paid $7,000 out of pocket to do it. It went on to make tens of millions of dollars in the theaters.
And Crispy hates that guy.
And Crispy hates that guy. I'm sorry, Chris. I didn't know you hated that guy.
A little close to home this morning. So.
I'm sorry. Did that guy like yell at you? All right, well, I still like the movie. But anyway, so a little bit more about it, right? So what is this movie about? It's about 4 guys who are engineers, obviously, because the guy who wrote it's an engineer, and they are working together on the side after work, and you can see they're still in their work clothes. They're just coming right to the guy's garage to try to work on side projects. And they are trying to invent a machine that will make anti-gravity possible. So they are trying to work on building this machine to allow it so that you can float an object in space. Two of the guys, the main two characters, think this is a waste of time, that it won't work. and they're just doing it for two of the other people. But one of the things that I guess I wanted to allude to, you can already start to see, is that very quickly they discover they have something that they didn't think they were going to get. They find something far more valuable than they would have thought, and you start to watch throughout the movie as it progresses, very quickly the decisions the two main characters make. They start to branch in how they're going to approach this new rare thing. So we're going to show the intro. And so another thing I really like about this is right from the very beginning of the movie, like a good thriller would, it sets a phenomenal tone in just the first minute and a half. In just the first minute and a half, you should be asking so many questions. Who is this guy on the phone? Who is he calling? What's going on? How does he know all of this stuff? And very quickly, you start to get the sense of what kind of a movie we're dealing with. So take a look at that next.
Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to read this, and you're going to listen, and you're going to stay on the line, and you're not going to interrupt, and you're going to speak for any reason. Some of this you know. I'm going to start at the top of the page. Meticulous. Yes. Methodical. Educated. They were these things. Nothing extreme, like anyone they varied. There were days of mistakes, laziness, and infighting. And there were days, good days, when by anyone's judgment, they would have to be considered clever. No one would say that what they were doing was complicated. It wouldn't even be considered new, except for maybe in the geological sense. They took from their surroundings what was needed and made of it something more.
So as the intro to a movie, I feel like that's a fantastic intro. You already get a sense of who these guys are, what they're doing, what they're working together on. But also it just puts this ominous tone. You hear that tinkling piano music throughout the whole movie of just this ominous, like overarching piano theme throughout the whole film. So now that being the case, so I said this movie is a great metaphor for how you approach the path of the righteous person versus whether or not you're going to follow in with the world or whether or not you're going to follow with God's plans. So in 1 John 2:15 through 16, it says, "Do not love this world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and a pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not of the Father, but from the world." So I'll read that again, because there's quite a bit there. "Do not love this world, nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and a pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from the world." So, what is this movie about? So I said it's about four men that are trying to invent this anti-gravity machine, but very quickly, as they're working on inventing this, they find that there's more to this invention than they thought. And they were kind of trying to improve on an existing design, and they ended up making out something totally different. But first, there's a bit of a lighthearted part to the movie that I really like, which is, unlike most movies, this has a very strange sense of dialogue. So you can kind of see, this is a guy who's never written movies before, because and they took one take pretty much for every shot, because in almost every take you can see the main guy who's directing it muttering "cut" under his breath at the end of the scene, as well as you can see the dialogue overlaps because they weren't reading it very quick. They were like rushing through all this dialogue to fit it in to the 80-minute time frame they had. So there's a tremendous amount of what I call like the Gilmore Girls effect, but if the Gilmore Girls were written by engineers. So there's just tens of 20 minutes of just them chattering on about technological things. But what makes it very interesting, I think, is that it's all, for the most part, pretty valid science after I slowed it down and watched it 10 times to figure out what they were talking about. So I want to show you a clip of this. And again, I think this is a very interesting clip because I don't expect you to understand it. I don't have any idea what they're talking about for the most part, but there's a lot of humor injected in their conversation, a lot of jokes that go into just this short clip.
These guys. What?
Liquid helium. These guys are fun.
No, so that's what this is, okay? That's the whole difference, that's what the box is. See, this way we don't have to play the game where we're going back and forth, coming up with new and innovative ways to make the thing colder and generally unusable in the process.
Aaron, I
See,
did
this is coming right from the back end.
unmarketable.
And unmarketable. By coming out from the back end, see, rather than changing the surrounding temperature, we'll just change the level that I'll conduct, the transition temperature. And see, by bombarding these edges,
So
I'll
what
be
he's
able
saying
to-
is these guys, they're dropping the ceramic, the temperature lower and lower. Makes the ceramic less resistant, knocks out the interior
Knocks
magnetic
out.
field.
Exactly.
Exactly. What he's saying
What I'm
is,
saying is, we drop the box down on it, okay, focus our own magnetic field to the gate, knock out with the inverse what's going on inside the ceramic.
Smart.
And that's change the transition temperature to something we can work with.
what are we saying that is?
Hopefully near room temperature.
What is that about the best mathematician's a lazy one? What did you ask for?
I asked.
Are these type 1?
Yeah.
What'd you call it?
No. These type 1 right here.
Superconductors.
Yeah, there's type 1.
What? Is that gonna be a problem?
There's plenty lying around at work, but they're all barcoded, so.
Well, if I have to buy the kids, I'll buy the kids.
What do you mean
I mean,
about
it's
this?
so- What?
I can get them.
You can,
Are you sure? I don't like this idea anyways. Yeah, I mean, you're right, if you gotta buy them, you gotta buy them, but I think everything else we can take care of.
What do you know about the source here?
You know that story about how NASA spent millions of dollars developing this pen that writes in zero G? Did you ever read that? Yeah. How Russia solved the problem? Yeah, they used a pencil. Right, a normal wooden pencil. Just seems like Philip takes the NASA route almost every time.
so palladium, right?
You have their diagram, hey, what's it say?
Well, they use the ratio of both, platinum and palladium, but I don't know if that's necessary with the change they make. I think they're just showing off. If you have it, you gotta use it, right?
Hey, you guys want to get a replacement, right?
I'm putting down 4 ounces of palladium.
Did Robert look at it?
Yeah,
I can't fix it.
Okay, where are you getting it?
Walmart is like $50.
Okay, can you get a receipt, please?
So like platinum or palladium is less
Hey,
resistant?
Just, it's not a,
Yeah, I don't care. So resistance.
it's not, yes.
Would you jiggle the,
Call it that? Yeah.
flip the,
Robert did it.
well, yes, yeah, I guess, high. Well, then which is cheaper?
you're not gonna buy it, are you?
Well, unless you got a few grams of palladium laying around. Well, I'm just saying, why would they put it in there if you didn't need it?
One catalytic converter. It's fine, it's fine. Just remember to put it back, okay? Your mission's one.
So this is a weird movie, right? You get that already off the set. If you get too many minutes of that, and you're just like, what on earth are they talking about? And not only that, but just, I love the humor as they're starting to dismantle things in this guy's house to get all the parts they need. As they're pulling out the capacitors out of it, the high voltage capacitors out of his microwave, trying to get palladium out of his catalytic converter. So this, and I love the line at the end where he's like, oh, just remember to put it back, it'll be fine. So again, this is a movie mostly written by an engineer who is kind of trying to give a little bit of an insight into what maybe his day-to-day looks like. And you see kind of the friendship that these 4 guys have early on as they're working together to try to build this machine. And for the most part, all the things they're doing are what you would do. If you needed a couple of really high voltage capacitors, you could get them out of the microwave. If you needed palladium, that would be a good place to get it, depending on what kind of car you had. So it's interesting because it's kind of fairly realistic scientific chatter, but also put around this otherwise ridiculous storyline. And so now what happens though is the 2 guys, as they build this machine, they kind of come back a day later, and without, not all 4 of them, the 2 main characters, Abe and Aaron, they come back and they realize this machine does something they did not expect. So they're able to put it in, and it's able to lighten whatever object they put in it by 10%. But there's this film starts growing all over it. And so the one guy starts to wonder, what is this film about? And it's like a mold or something. And they end up putting a watch in there and finding out that the watch had traveled 1,300 times each minute. It traveled 1,300 extra minutes. And so something's very strange going on with this machine. And not only that, they start to realize that it has some strange properties with power as well.
What'd you do to this thing? Huh? What? Looks like a dock I tested it.
Okay, that's the clip. And I rigged this in the box so I could have some control over the feed to it. I figured it's the easiest
This
way
is
to
just controlling the box.
Right, just the box.
The plate stays the same.
Yeah, the plate's the same. What you do is you gradually feed it to... Okay, you hear that? How it's see, I'm not touching it. It's growing with its own momentum. It's like a feedback loop, and it just regulates itself. What you do is when it gets there, you bring it back, and there you go, it coasts. It's stable, it stays like that. So it works. Yeah, it does. Is that like 10%? Jeez. Yeah, it knocks another couple points out too by the time it reaches the peak. You may want to come over here and take a look at this. Okay, what am I looking at? What are we pulling out of the batteries? I don't know, probably 24 volts. I mean, no more than that, right? Okay. So your meter's jacked up. That's what I figured. So I tried 3 others, and I got the exact same thing. I spent all last night.
What was it?
I don't know. I spent all last night in a 2-hour lunch break today just double
Well,
checking.
yeah, I mean, we're missing something. You know, there's something wrong here. We're not pulling out more than we're putting in.
Slightly more.
Well, yeah, whatever. It's not like a volt and a half more than we're putting in. I mean, it's probably the batteries. If they're cheap batteries, you know, probably not regulated right. It is weird, though.
Want to see something weirder? Okay, let's go with this again. 2 batteries, right? 24 volts. What are we pulling out of this one? Just for fun.
12 volts.
How about this one?
Should be 12 volts.
So what the hell is this thing?
It doesn't stay like that.
No, I mean, it winds down in a few minutes. What does that? I don't know. I'll tell him something. I'll tell him we're spreading for bugs or something. It should just be there too anyways. Unless you want to bring him
No,
out.
nice. I mean, they have their work in there too.
You know, if Phil finds out about that or even sees things, gonna have to take it apart.
No,
You know, I'm just putting a love tweak on it.
Yeah, I know. No, you're right.
Hey, it's my garage, okay? It's not like they're paying rent.
So they discover this machine does something they didn't expect, and immediately they decide they're going to cut the other 2 guys out of it. So then they start lying to the other guys, saying that they're going to spray for bugs, and they're going to not tell them that it had these extra properties. And so then slowly, very quickly in the movie, things start to go very, very strange as you're watching it in linear time, because they have discovered a time machine. And they've discovered a time machine that they are then able to come back to that day they first turned the machine on, and it starts looping very, very quickly. So the guy you saw in the black hair there, Aaron, that was his second trip back, and he was trying to cut the other 2 guys out because he knew it was a time machine already. He came back in time to prevent them from sharing anything. And so you're like, oh, wait, what? What does that have to, that did not seem like it would be a time machine movie. What's going on? And pretty much from that moment to the rest of the end of the movie, it becomes very difficult to tell who is who. It becomes very difficult to tell what the order of things is, because they start traveling back and over and over and over and over again, trying to relive those 4 days to make it perfect. And to try to cut the other 2 guys out, to try to make as much money as they can from the stock market. And it becomes like an addiction to both of them. And what's weird is, so I look up, not only is this a time travel movie, but it's probably the most complicated time travel movie I think ever written, because I looked up this morning a diagram of all the time plots, and it was like this huge snarled mess. There's at least 11 timelines, but they think up to 30 more, because the film's a little vague. And so you're trying to watch this movie, I'm not ruining it for you, don't worry, because you're going to watch it and you're going to still have no idea what's going on the first 4 or 5 times you see the movie. But what happens is, though, you start to see very quickly the 2 of them get very addicted to this idea of trying to perfect just these 4 days. Because they turn the machine on Tuesday morning, and then as they live through to the end of Friday, they keep living it over and over and over and over again, as they try to make as much money as they can, as they try to solve all their problems, cut the other guys out. And then ultimately it starts to they go way too far into it, and they start trying to do things that are very, very strange and stop each other. And so you see then they start to send back 4 and 5 and 6 times trying to stop each other from being able to learn about this time machine. And then finally, and where I feel like this is really applicable to what we're talking about, right? That this love of the world just brings these empty cravings, is that each time they start to realize it's more and more hollow. And each time they're like, maybe we can make it better. Maybe we can make it better. And it's as they just try to squeeze every single thing out of this 1 4-day period. And And ultimately, it erodes their trust in each other as they try to like cut each other out of the deals by going back in time and messing with each other. But then also, you start to see they have physical side effects. And that's where it gets really creepy, is that, and much like the Bible talks about sin, where they say, look, following a route of sin is unhealthy. It causes negative side effects. It causes problems. Much like that, these guys start to have problems the more they abuse this machine. And they start doing really weird things where they put a machine in another machine and sit in that and send that one back in time. And they start living over and over and over and over again those same 4 days. And they start having like seizures, and they start like falling unconscious from heat stroke and all kinds of weird problems. So you see this in one of the last scenes. And the movie doesn't really have a climax, which is even stranger. It just kind of gets more and more creepy and more complex. But there's a scene where you see Abe, the blonde guy, he realizes they've gone too far. Like, he realizes this is unhealthy, it's damaging us. At this point, it's like they've had strokes, so they can't write, they can't talk correctly. It's starting to actually have severe negative effects for them. And he's like, we've gone way too far. Like, you can see, he never says it, but he's like, he realizes that he's gone too far. And he tries to get out, and he tries to stop them from going any farther. But then Aaron, the black-haired guy, he thinks they haven't even started to go enough. And so what they're doing is they're planning in this one scene, and the way this movie goes, it's like they try to fit 10 hours of story into like, 80 minutes. So there's a allusion to this scene where they've traveled back 30 or 40 times trying to perfect this one event where they save the day at a party. And it sounds so ridiculous. What does that have to do with anything? But the one guy's like addicted to getting this day perfect. So he wants to go back, and he wants to look like the hero at this one party. And you see Abe, the blonde-haired guy, he realizes they've gone too far. And he's going to play along just a little bit longer, but then he's going to try to ultimately stop them. And that's what's going to finally break their friendship in two, as the one guy goes to the path of constantly reliving this day over and over, the other one just tries to get out. So we'll show that next.
Take care tomorrow. Yeah, you watch her all the time. This guy's crazy enough to walk into a room full of people waving a shotgun around. What do you think he's going to do if he ever finds her alone? And this way we know exactly what happens. We have complete control over it. At the end of the night, this guy is arrested and goes to jail. That's the way it goes. Your words, not mine. And come on, it has to be you. She said she was there because you told her you would be there. Tell me I came back and did this for nothing. He doesn't fire. No, he didn't ever fire. It's not even when you rushed him. No, he didn't the time I wasn't there. He did the time I was when I rushed him. And, from Robert tells you he didn't do it tonight. He doesn't have the nerve. I mean, the guy, we know everything. Okay? We're prescient. We can still be careful. Maybe we can get to the gun without him knowing. We definitely can. I mean, he leaves it in the truck before he goes in. I mean, we don't even need to, but if it makes you feel better, let's roll with our hands. What do you mean? Why can't we ride like normal people? I don't know. I can see the letters. I know what they should look like. I just can't get my hand to make them easily. Try comparing it to your left hand. Almost the same. There it is. Yeah. Hey, guess what today is? No, it's your friend Robert's birthday. That's his last practice, so I have best of bread. No real bread.
I can tell you with certainty what I did that night when it was my turn. But I think it would do little good. Because what the world remembers, the actuality, the last revision is what counts apparently.
So there you see the phone call was the girl asking if he's going to go to the party tonight. And he's trying to decide, do I tell her, yes, I'm going to the party, or do I tell her no, and we prevent this timeline from this thing happening? And the thing is, it's nothing bad. What they do is they save the day. This guy had come in previously and was like threatening everybody. And what they do is they just keep looping back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. They find out where his gun is. They take the ammo out. They then sneak in, unlock his car door. So he comes in waving the shotgun around. And they go, hey, buddy, let's calm down, let's calm down. And they look like the heroes. And it's such a trivial thing. But they spend like 30 tries trying to get it just right to make themselves look as good as they possibly can. But you see, like, right at that moment, as the story goes, is where Abe, the blonde guy, realized we've gone way too far. And like, as the phone rings, because you can hear Aaron trying to get him to do it. Aaron's saying, oh, I know, I've done this before. I know where the gun is. I know where the ammo is. I know exactly what he does. I've tried it 3 times myself. He's never tried to shoot me any of the times. And just trying to egg him on, trying to get Abe to come back into this world where they keep mutating history. And Abe, at this point, just decides that he doesn't want to do it anymore. But then the phone rings, and one more time, he's like, all right, yeah, I'll be there tonight, trying to get the girl to go to the party. But after that point forward, from the rest of the movie, he decides that he does not want to do it anymore. And that he's going to try to get out, and he's trying to convince Aaron to stop going back and stop feeding this addiction. But it's a very creepy scene, because you see like they're already having these physical effects, and it's just how disoriented they both are with this whole scenario. And so like now, I'm going to read that again, 1 John 2:15, and you can see exactly kind of what I'm talking about. Do not love this world nor the things it offers you. For when you love the world, you do not have the love of the Father in you. For the world offers only a craving for physical pleasure, a craving for everything we see, and a pride in our achievements and possessions. These are not from the Father, but are from the world. And then finally, I was going to read Galatians 6, 7, and 8. It says, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their sinful nature will harvest death and decay from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. And I felt like this was such a good metaphor in this movie of these guys finding this otherwise not a bad thing, a time machine. Wow, that could be really great. But then they start to abuse it, and they get addicted to abusing it. And more they're trying to satisfy these even very simple, strange cravings, like wanting to look really good at this one party, which it doesn't even matter, but they're going to just keep doing it over and over again at any detriment to themselves. I felt like that was exactly what he talks about. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. Like another part I didn't show, you can imagine, is how they go back trying to get more money. And so they're constantly playing the stock market. How can I borrow more money today so that I can put on this stock, which is going to go up 50%? And because it's only a 4-day period, they only have so much money. So they keep trying to loop and counter loop and come back just after so that they can end up making this huge amount of money at the end of the 4 days. And there's a scene that actually Sarah pointed out when I was getting ready for this, which is where the guy says, like, well, how are we going to explain all this money to our wives? And the guy's like, I don't know, like, we'll just make up something or whatever. Like, we'll just cut them out of the story. Like, don't tell them the truth about this thing that we're hiding because they couldn't handle it. And I feel like that's so true of how we act a lot of times about our sin, where, it's this private thing, we want to keep it to ourselves. And even though it can be harming us, it can be hurting us, making us worse, we still want to keep it private, and rather than deal with it and leave it, the sin where it was, we just keep going back to it. And there's that cycle that's very hard to break. But like, really, unlike the characters in this movie, we only get one chance at something. So where they get a chance, Abe spends, and you see the rest of the movie, he spends trying to go back and make things right. We don't really get that chance. So like, when I'm at work and I mouth off to somebody, that's it. I've mouthed off to him from now to the rest of eternity. That is a fixed point in time. And it's never going to be able to undo that. I can apologize. I can try to make atonement. I can try to restore that relationship, but I'm always going to have mouthed off to that person that I shouldn't have. And so, like, to me, this is such a powerful metaphor to see not only sin in this strong addiction, but when we act in the way that follows a sinful path, it's like that forever. And like, for me, that was probably the biggest thing that I took away from this. And like, it's a sobering thought the more I thought about it. That, like, when I mouth off to that person, I'm going to have to remember that forever. And that's always going to have been that way. And that's maybe not something I want to have to live with, right? Maybe, I mean, it's a small thing, for sure. But like, what I want to do is try to make the decision next time I get that chance to make the righteous decision. To say something politely to him, say nothing at all, to forgive him for whatever it was, rather than just being a jerk about it. So, just again, Galatians, don't be misled. You cannot mock the justice of God. You will always harvest what you plant. Those who live only to satisfy their own sinful nature will harvest decay and death from that sinful nature. But those who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. So like this week, I really encourage you to try to think about, okay, what are some chances where I can follow on the righteous path? And how can I do that more? You know, am I in a meeting today where it's going to be really long? If it's a long day of work, is it just really hot outside and I don't want to deal with people? Am I really tired? What are those times where you really need to reinforce living on the righteous path? And think about how you can use those to serve God's kingdom and serve the people you're with. So, you guys want And I really think if we take more of our effort and try to focus on that righteous path, it's going to come up. And he says that those people who live to please the Spirit will harvest everlasting life from the Spirit. It may not be that we have perfect lives here. It may not be that we're free from suffering here. But what we're doing is we're storing up our treasures in heaven. So let's pray. God, I thank you that we have a chance to see these movies that perhaps in other ways would just be interesting stories, but we get to use them to learn more about you and learn about your kingdom. Lord, I thank you that the truth you have given us in your word is applicable in every situation, even in silly stories about science fiction that don't make sense, but also into our daily lives. I thank you that you have given us this amazing gift of grace. Please bless us all and bless everyone here.